Husband tells wife to shut up on Family Feud. Steve Harvey stops the show instantly. The audience was still laughing when the words came out. Just shut up. 3 words. Not shouted across the stage, not screamed during an argument. They were spoken by a husband standing inches away from his wife beneath the bright lights of Family Feud. But the microphone caught them. So did the audience. And most importantly, so did Steve Harvey. Steve had been walking toward the survey board when he suddenly stopped. The laughter disappeared from his face. He turned around. For several seconds, nobody moved. The husband tried to smile as if nothing serious had happened. His wife stared down at the podium. Then Steve slowly walked back toward them. He lowered his microphone. "Hold on," he said. The audience went completely quiet. Steve looked at the husband. "What did you just say to her?" And from that moment forward, the game was no longer the most important thing happening on that stage. But to understand why Steve reacted the way he did, you have to understand everything that had happened before those 3 words were spoken. Because the tension hadn't started on television. It had been building for years. If you enjoy powerful stories about family, respect, and the moments that reveal who people really are, subscribe and stay with us. Because what happened next left an entire studio stunned. The afternoon taping had started normally. The studio was packed. Families filled the audience wearing matching shirts and waving handmade signs. Music blasted through the speakers. The massive Family Feud board glowed behind the stage. Contestants bounced nervously in place while cameras moved around them. Steve Harvey walked onto the set to thunderous applause. He smiled, adjusted his jacket, and immediately started joking with the front row. Everything felt light. Everything felt fun. The first family introduced that afternoon was the Patterson family from Birmingham, Alabama. Standing at the center of the group was 47-year-old Angela Patterson. Angela was the kind of person who looked nervous until she smiled. Then everything changed. She had a warm, almost contagious smile. When Steve introduced her, she waved at the audience and immediately looked embarrassed by the attention. Steve noticed. "You nervous?" Angela laughed. "A little." "A little?" Steve looked toward the audience. "She's shaking like she owes somebody money." The crowd erupted. Angela covered her face. Even her family started laughing. Steve grinned. "There you go. Now you're relaxed." Standing beside Angela was her husband, Raymond Patterson. Raymond was 50, tall, broad-shouldered. Confident, he worked as a regional sales manager and seemed much more comfortable in front of the cameras than Angela. When Steve shook his hand, Raymond gave a strong handshake and immediately started joking. "My wife has been practicing answers for 3 months." Angela turned toward him. "I have not." "You absolutely have." She laughed. "Maybe a little." The audience laughed with them. At first, they looked like any married couple teasing each other. Nobody thought much about it. Their children, however, seemed slightly less relaxed. Their oldest daughter, Jasmine, was 25. She worked as an elementary school teacher. Their son, Caleb, was 22 and finishing college. Angela's younger sister, Renee, completed the team. From the moment the family walked onto the stage, Jasmine kept watching her parents. Not constantly, but often enough that someone paying attention might have noticed. Whenever Raymond interrupted Angela, Jasmine glanced toward her mother. Whenever Raymond corrected something Angela said, Caleb's expression tightened slightly. Small things. Easy to miss. And because everyone was laughing, they seemed harmless. The competing family was the Brooks family from Nashville. They were energetic from the beginning. They shouted answers. They danced between rounds. Their grandmother, Lorraine, nearly knocked Steve's microphone out of his hand while celebrating an answer. The audience loved both families. The game began. The first survey question was simple. Name something people do immediately after waking up. Angela and a member of the Brooks family stepped toward the buzzers. Angela hit first. Check their phone. The board revealed the number 1 answer. The Patterson family exploded. Angela jumped backward with both hands over her mouth. Steve pointed toward her. You see? All that shaking for nothing. The audience applauded. Raymond leaned toward Angela. Lucky guess. He smiled when he said it. Angela laughed, but Jasmine didn't. The first round went smoothly. The Pattersons won control. Angela answered brush their teeth. Caleb said use the bathroom. Jasmine answered make coffee. Almost every answer appeared on the board. They won the round easily. Between rounds, Steve walked toward Angela. You're good at this. Angela laughed. Don't tell him that. She pointed toward Raymond. Steve looked at Raymond. Why? Angela started to answer. Raymond interrupted. Because then I'll hear about it all week. The crowd laughed. Angela laughed too, but Steve gave her a quick look. Only for a second, then they continued. The next round started. Name something husbands pretend not to hear their wives asking them to do. The audience immediately reacted. Steve shook his head. This survey about to destroy some marriages. Angela laughed harder than anyone. Raymond stepped toward the buzzer against the opposing contestant. He won. Take out the trash. Number 1 answer. Raymond celebrated. He pointed toward Angela. You see that? Angela nodded. I've been asking for 25 years. Huge laughter. Steve bent over. Raymond shook his head. See what I deal with? Again, everyone laughed. But Angela's smile faded a little faster than everyone else's. The Patterson family controlled the board again. Jasmine answered wash the dishes. Caleb said fix something around the house. Renee guessed go shopping. Strike. Then Angela stepped forward. Steve read the question again. Angela thought carefully. Help with the laundry? Survey says. Number 3. The family cheered. Angela smiled. Raymond leaned toward her. Finally, she looked at him. What? You took forever. Angela's expression changed, only slightly. She turned toward the board again. The game continued. By the third round, the Patterson family had a strong lead. Angela was responsible for several of their best answers. The audience had started chanting her name whenever she walked toward the buzzer. Angela. 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 She laughed every time. Steve encouraged it. There you go. The chanting grew louder. For maybe the first time that afternoon, Angela seemed to stop worrying about what anyone beside her thought. She was having fun. Real fun. Then Steve read the next question. We asked 100 married women, name something your husband does when he knows he's wrong. The audience screamed. Steve slowly turned toward the families. Oh, this ain't going to end well. Angela laughed. Raymond stepped back. Don't look at me. Steve pointed toward him. I didn't say nothing to you. The audience laughed harder. Angela faced a woman from the Brooks family at the buzzer. Steve repeated the question. Name something your husband does when he knows he's wrong. Angela hit the buzzer. Stops talking. The audience exploded. Even Steve started laughing. Stops talking. He looked at Raymond. That's you? Angela hesitated, then smiled. Sometimes, Raymond shook his head. Steve turned toward the board. Survey says, number 2 answer. 38 points. The Patterson family celebrated. Raymond leaned toward Angela. Should have said apologize. Angela looked at him. You don't apologize. A wave of laughter swept across the studio. It was a genuinely funny answer. Angela had delivered it naturally. Steve's eyebrows went up. The audience loved it. Jasmine laughed. Caleb clapped. Even Renee covered her mouth. But Raymond didn't laugh. His smile disappeared. Angela noticed immediately. She turned forward again. Steve also noticed. The moment lasted only a few seconds. Then the game moved on. The Patterson family eventually cleared the board. But something about Raymond's demeanor had changed. During the commercial break, Angela drank water. Jasmine quietly stepped closer. You okay? Angela nodded. I'm fine. You sure? I'm just nervous. Jasmine looked toward her father. Raymond was speaking with one of the producers. Angela squeezed her daughter's hand. Enjoy this. Jasmine nodded. When filming resumed, Steve returned with the same high energy. The next round would determine which family had a major advantage going into the final portion of the game. The question appeared. Name something a wife might say that immediately tells her husband he's in trouble. Steve stared toward the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, pray for these men. The audience laughed. Angela walked to the buzzer against Lorraine Brooks. Steve read the question. The buzzer sounded. Angela was first. We need to talk. The board immediately lit up. Number 1 answer. 62 points. The Patterson family screamed. Angela jumped. Jasmine wrapped her arms around her mother. The audience started chanting again. Angela, Angela, Angela. Steve walked toward her. You running this whole game. Angela laughed. No, no, yes you are. He pointed toward the scoreboard. Numbers don't lie. Angela looked toward her family. This is everybody. And that should have been a happy moment. It should have remained a happy moment. Instead, Raymond leaned closer. Would you stop? Angela's smile disappeared. She looked at him. Stop what? Acting like you're doing everything. I didn't say that. Yes, you did. Angela shook her head. I literally just said it's everybody. Steve was several feet away talking toward the audience. The crowd was still applauding. Raymond leaned closer. Then he said it. Just shut up. The microphone attached near the podium caught every syllable, and unfortunately for Raymond, Steve Harvey heard it too. Steve stopped. For a moment, the audience continued laughing because they hadn't all realized what had happened. Then they noticed Steve wasn't moving. He turned around. The studio gradually became quiet. Angela looked down. Jasmine's mouth opened slightly. Caleb stared at his father. Raymond looked toward Steve. Steve walked back. Slowly, no jokes, no smile. He stopped directly in front of Raymond and Angela. Hold on. Raymond adjusted his shirt. Steve looked at him. What did you just say to her? Raymond forced a laugh. Nothing. Steve didn't move. I heard you. Raymond glanced toward Angela. We're married. We talk like that. Angela stayed silent. Steve looked at her. Then he looked toward Jasmine and Caleb. Their expressions told him something. He turned back toward Raymond. No, no. Steve lifted the microphone. You're standing on national television. Raymond nodded. I know. You're standing next to your wife. Yes. And your children are right there. Raymond stopped nodding. Steve continued. And because she answered a question correctly, because people are cheering for her, you tell her to shut up? The room was silent. Raymond tried to explain. Steve, it wasn't serious. Steve raised one hand. I'm not asking whether you think it was serious. That ended the explanation. Steve turned toward Angela. Ma'am. Angela looked up. How long have you two been married? 26 years. Steve nodded slowly. 26 years. Angela nodded. Steve looked toward Jasmine. And that's your daughter? Yes. How old are you? 25. Steve looked toward Caleb. And you? 22. Steve paused. Then he returned his attention to Angela. You've raised 2 grown children. Angela nodded. You work? Yes. What do you do? I'm a respiratory therapist. Steve's expression changed. For how long? Almost 21 years. A few audience members began applauding. Angela seemed surprised by the reaction. Steve nodded. So you've spent 21 years helping people breathe? Angela smiled nervously. Yes, and you're standing here helping your family win this game. The audience applauded again. Steve looked at Raymond. And this man tells you to shut up? Raymond's face tightened. Steve. Steve turned immediately. I'm talking to your wife. Raymond went silent. A few people in the audience reacted with audible gasps. Steve looked back at Angela. Are you okay? Angela nodded quickly. Yes. Steve didn't immediately accept it. Don't answer because we're on television. Angela swallowed. Steve's tone became quieter. Are you okay? Angela's eyes became wet. She looked toward Jasmine. Her daughter was already crying. Angela took a breath. I'm okay. Steve nodded. Then Angela added something nobody expected. I'm used to it. The audience went completely still. Jasmine looked down. Caleb's jaw tightened. Even Raymond's expression changed. Steve didn't say anything for several seconds. He looked toward the floor. Then back at Angela. You're used to it? Angela immediately seemed to regret saying it. She wiped beneath one eye. I don't mean. Steve gently interrupted. No, you said what you said. Angela nodded. Steve turned toward Raymond. Sir, step back. Raymond stared at him. What? Step back from the podium. Raymond hesitated. Steve repeated himself, step back. Raymond moved several feet away. The audience began clapping, not cheering, clapping, slowly, then louder. Jasmine moved beside her mother. Angela looked embarrassed by the attention. Steve shook his head. No, don't do that. Angela looked at him. Don't shrink because people are supporting you. That sentence hit the room differently. Angela's eyes filled again. Steve continued, you didn't create this moment. You didn't tell yourself to shut up. You were playing the game. You were helping your family, and you were doing a pretty good job. The audience erupted. Angela laughed through tears. Steve pointed toward the scoreboard. Look at the score. More laughter. For a few seconds, the tension eased. Then Steve grew serious again. He turned toward Raymond. Let me explain something. Raymond stood with his hands at his sides. You can joke with your wife. You can disagree with your wife. You can be frustrated. You can even be mad. Steve paused, but respect shouldn't disappear because you're mad. The audience applauded loudly. Steve continued, especially not in front of your children. Raymond looked toward Jasmine and Caleb. Neither looked away. For the first time all afternoon, he seemed uncomfortable. Steve turned toward Jasmine. You love your mama? Jasmine nodded through tears. More than anything. Angela immediately started crying. Steve looked toward Caleb. You? Caleb nodded. She's everything. Angela covered her mouth. The audience made a collective emotional sound. Steve turned toward Angela. See? She nodded. Steve smiled softly. You raised people who know exactly who you are. That broke her. Angela cried openly. Jasmine hugged her. Caleb stepped over and wrapped both of them in his arms. Renee joined them. The audience stood. Hundreds of people rose from their seats. Steve stepped away and allowed the family to have the moment. Raymond remained several feet behind them. The camera briefly captured his expression. Whatever confidence he had carried onto the stage had disappeared. Eventually Angela composed herself. She wiped her face. Steve walked closer. You want to keep playing? Angela laughed. I look terrible. Steve looked toward the audience. She talking about looking terrible while she's beating everybody on the board. The audience laughed. Angela shook her head. Yes, I want to keep playing. Steve extended his hand. Then let's play. Angela took it. The game resumed. But the energy had completely changed. Before the confrontation, Angela answered carefully. Afterward, she answered confidently. Steve read the next prompt. Name something people hide when unexpected guests arrive. Angela answered immediately. Dirty laundry. Number 1 answer. The crowd screamed. Steve ran halfway across the stage. Oh, she back. Angela laughed. Jasmine clapped wildly. The next question came. Name something people pretend to understand even when they don't. Angela answered. Technology. Number 2 answer. Another huge reaction. Steve looked toward Raymond. Then toward Angela. He didn't have to say anything. Everyone understood. The Patterson family continued scoring. Angela wasn't carrying the entire game, but she had become its emotional center. Caleb gave a winning answer. Jasmine followed with another. Renee completed the round. And suddenly, the Patterson family had secured a place in Fast Money. The studio erupted. Steve approached them. Who's playing? Jasmine pointed immediately. My mom. Angela shook her head. No, Jasmine laughed. Yes, absolutely not. Caleb joined in. Mom, you're doing it. Steve nodded. I agree with the children. Angela looked at him. Of course you do. Steve laughed. There she is. The audience cheered. Angela would play the second half of Fast Money. Jasmine went first. She scored well. Very well. When Angela returned to the stage, she had no idea how many points were needed. Steve positioned her at the podium. You ready? Angela took a deep breath. I think so. Steve leaned closer. No. She looked confused. Steve smiled. You've been ready all day. The audience applauded. Angela nodded. Okay. The clock started. Steve asked the first question. Name something people check before leaving the house. Wallet. Name something associated with a hospital. Doctor. Name a reason someone might wake up in the middle of the night. Bathroom. Name something people complain is too expensive. Groceries. Name something you might lose at an airport. Luggage. She completed all 5 answers with seconds remaining. The audience applauded. Then the scores appeared. Wallet. Strong answer. Doctor. Excellent answer. Bathroom. Top answer. Angela covered her mouth. Groceries. Huge points. Very close. Only a small number of points remained. Steve turned toward the final answer. Name something you might lose at an airport. Angela had said luggage. The board revealed the points. For half a second, Angela couldn't calculate the total. Then the winning graphic appeared. They had done it. The Patterson family exploded. Jasmine ran toward her mother. Caleb followed. Renee screamed. Angela stood frozen. Steve grabbed her hand. You won. Angela looked toward the board. We won? You won. Angela screamed. The entire family embraced. Then something unexpected happened. Angela turned around. Raymond was standing a few feet away. For the first time all afternoon, he looked uncertain about whether he should approach her. Angela stared at him. The celebration around them continued. Steve watched carefully. Raymond finally stepped forward. He didn't reach for Angela. He simply stood there. Then, quietly, he said something. The microphones caught it. I'm sorry. Angela looked at him. Raymond continued. I shouldn't have said that. She didn't immediately respond. He looked toward Jasmine. Then Caleb. Then back toward his wife. You didn't deserve that. The audience stayed quiet. Nobody cheered. Nobody applauded yet. It was too personal. Angela studied Raymond's face. Then she said something important. Not just because we're here. Raymond nodded. I know. Not just because Steve heard you. I know. Angela took a breath. Then we'll talk at home. Raymond nodded again. Okay, only then did Steve step forward. He didn't declare the problem solved. Because 26 years of marriage aren't repaired in 20 seconds. He didn't force Angela to hug Raymond. He didn't turn the apology into a neat television ending. Instead, he simply looked at Raymond. That's where you start. Raymond nodded. Steve turned toward Angela. And you? Yes? Don't stop talking. The audience exploded. Angela laughed. Jasmine cried again. Steve repeated himself. You hear me? Angela nodded. Yes, don't stop talking. The audience rose for the second time. And this time Angela didn't look down. She stood there. She accepted the applause. Not arrogantly, not dramatically. She simply allowed herself to receive it. For Jasmine, that became the part of the afternoon she remembered most. Not the money, not the answers, not even Steve confronting her father. It was watching her mother stand still while hundreds of people applauded her, and seeing Angela resist the instinct to disappear. Because Jasmine had seen that instinct her entire life. At restaurants, if the order was wrong, Angela would eat it anyway. At work, she often allowed other people to receive credit. At family gatherings, she served everyone before sitting down herself. If an argument began, Angela tried to end it before anyone became uncomfortable. She apologized when other people bumped into her. She lowered her voice when someone raised theirs. She had spent years creating peace for everybody around her, sometimes at the expense of her own. After the taping, the family returned backstage. The atmosphere was much quieter there. No game show music. No audience. No giant scoreboard. Just a hallway, dressing rooms, production staff, and a family processing what had happened. Angela sat down. Jasmine sat beside her. For several seconds neither spoke. Then, Jasmine leaned against her mother's shoulder. Angela kissed her forehead. You okay? Jasmine laughed through tears. Why are you asking me? Because you're my daughter. Mom? Angela smiled. What? You always do that. Do what? Take care of everyone else first. Angela became quiet. Jasmine took her mother's hand. When he said that to you, she stopped. Angela waited. I hated it. I know. No, Mom, I really hated it. Angela nodded. Jasmine continued. And when you said you were used to it, her voice broke. Angela looked away. Jasmine squeezed her hand. You shouldn't be used to it. Angela didn't have an answer, because somewhere inside, she knew her daughter was right. Caleb entered the room a few minutes later. He had always been quieter than Jasmine. He sat across from his mother. You know what bothered me? Angela looked at him. What? That I wasn't surprised. The sentence hurt more than Angela expected. Caleb continued. I knew exactly what Dad was going to say before he said it. Angela closed her eyes briefly. I'm sorry. Caleb shook his head. No, he leaned forward. Don't apologize to me. Angela stared at her son. Just don't pretend it doesn't hurt you. For a long time, nobody spoke. Eventually, Raymond entered. The room immediately changed. He stopped near the doorway. Usually, Raymond filled silence. This time he didn't. He looked toward his children. Then Angela. I embarrassed you. Angela didn't answer. Raymond continued. And I embarrassed them. Jasmine watched him carefully. I thought I was joking. Caleb responded. You weren't. Raymond nodded. No. Angela finally spoke. The problem isn't what you said today. Raymond looked at her. The problem is that I knew exactly what to do when you said it. He didn't understand. Angela explained. I went quiet. Raymond said nothing. I didn't even have to think. I just went quiet. Her eyes filled. That's what scared me. Raymond looked down. For perhaps the first time, he wasn't able to argue his way around the truth. Angela continued. I don't want Jasmine thinking that's marriage. Jasmine wiped her eyes. I don't want Caleb thinking that's how you speak to someone you love. Caleb looked toward his father. Raymond nodded slowly. I understand. Angela shook her head. No, I don't think you do yet. Raymond looked at her again. And I'm tired of explaining everything immediately so nobody feels uncomfortable. The room became silent. Angela stood. For once, you can sit with it. Then she walked out with Jasmine. Caleb followed. Raymond remained behind. There was no dramatic ending in that hallway. No instant transformation. Real relationships rarely work that way. But something had shifted. And it wasn't just Raymond. It was Angela. For 26 years she had believed keeping peace meant avoiding confrontation. That afternoon taught her something different. Sometimes peace requires confrontation. Sometimes love requires boundaries. Sometimes being kind to another person means refusing to participate in the worst version of them. And sometimes the most important voice in the room is the one you've spent years silencing yourself. In the weeks that followed, Angela returned to work at the hospital. Her colleagues had always known her as dependable, calm, patient, the person everyone called during difficult shifts. But several co-workers noticed something subtle. Angela spoke more directly. When staffing became unreasonable, she said so. When a colleague tried to take credit for something Angela had organized, Angela corrected the record. Politely, clearly, without apologizing. One afternoon, a younger respiratory therapist approached her. I need to tell you something. Angela smiled. What? You seem different. Angela laughed. Is that good or bad? Good, the woman hesitated. You just seem taller. Angela looked down at herself. I'm the same height. I know. They both laughed. But Angela understood exactly what she meant. At home, things were harder. Raymond had spent years using sarcasm and criticism so casually that he often didn't seem to recognize when he was doing it. Now Angela recognized every instance, and instead of automatically absorbing it, she stopped him. One evening, Raymond criticized the way she had loaded the dishwasher. Angela turned around. Was that necessary? Raymond paused. Normally he would have argued. This time he looked at the dishwasher. No, then don't do it. Another evening he interrupted her while she was telling a story. Angela stopped speaking. Raymond continued for several seconds before noticing everyone looking at him. He went quiet. Sorry, Angela nodded. Then continued her story. Small moments. No television audience. No applause. But those moments mattered more. Because change isn't proven when everyone is watching. It's proven when nobody is. Jasmine later told her mother something that stayed with Angela. "You know what my favorite part of the show was?" Angela smiled. "Winning?" "No. Steve yelling at your father?" Jasmine laughed. "He didn't yell. You know what I mean." Jasmine shook her head. "My favorite part was when Steve told you not to stop talking." Angela became quiet. Jasmine continued, "Because I think you've been waiting your whole life for permission." Angela looked at her daughter. Then she smiled. "Maybe." Jasmine shook her head. "You don't need permission anymore." Angela never forgot that. And maybe that's why the moment on that stage mattered. Not because a famous television host came to someone's rescue. Angela didn't need rescuing. She had worked in medicine for more than 2 decades. She had raised 2 children. She had helped support a household. She had comforted frightened patients. She had survived long shifts, financial stress, family problems, sleepless nights and years of putting everyone else's needs ahead of her own. She already possessed strength. The problem was that she had become so accustomed to using that strength for everyone else that she had forgotten she could use it for herself. Steve didn't give her a voice. He simply refused to ignore what happened when someone tried to take it away. And perhaps the most important moment wasn't when Steve stopped the show. It wasn't when Raymond apologized. It wasn't even when the Patterson family won the money. It came when Angela was standing under the studio lights with hundreds of strangers on their feet. Steve looked at her, "Don't stop talking," and Angela nodded. Not the nervous nod she had given at the beginning of the show, not the automatic nod of someone trying to keep everyone happy. A different kind of nod, one that said, she understood. Years later, the prize money would be spent. The stage lights would belong to another family. The questions on the board would be forgotten. But Angela would remember those 3 words her husband had said. Just shut up. Not because they defined her, because they became the moment she finally decided they wouldn't. And she would remember Steve's answer too. Don't stop talking. Because sometimes one sentence can expose years of hurt, and another sentence can remind someone that their voice was never the problem. If this story meant something to you, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about family, dignity, courage, and the moments that reveal what truly matters. And remember, respect isn't something you should have to earn from the people who claim to love you. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't shout back, it's simply refuse to become silent. We'll see you in the next story.